Let's see. Josh, are you able to help with the stream? Okay, cool, thanks. So let me grab the agenda that I just lost. Here we go. Okay, everyone, this is consensus layer call 149. I'll put the link to the agenda here in the chat. It's issue 1258 on the PM repo that we all know and love. And yeah, so the agenda is pretty light today. I imagine everyone's really busy with Devnet 5 and getting PEX ready for mainnet. So yeah, let's go ahead and just jump in. And first up, yeah, we'll open with Devnet 5. I'd love to hear how we think about how this is going. I know there have been a number of issues with clients people have been working through. I looked at the DevNet yesterday and this morning, and yeah, well, it's looking better this morning than yesterday in terms of the chain health, but we still aren't finalizing. So, yeah, anyone want to give an overview of the latest progress there, and if there's anything we need to touch on to get back to finalizing? Yeah, Rafael?
Yes. Yes, so Perry is not around, so I'm giving the update. Yeah, regarding DevNet 5, as you said, we had a couple of problems there. It's currently not finalizing. There was a problem with regards with a gas estimation bug, which caused like a three-way fork between Geth. There was Nethermind Wrath and Aragon. That has been patched, and we now have like Nethermind and Wrath at the same fork. But there's also on the rest side, there's like another issue that they are actively looking into right now. We also had a bunch of changes on Aragon that just got merged that we have deployed recently. There is also a bug on some BSU nodes that are being investigated by the team. And we have also updated, yeah, that's mainly on DevNet 5. And then regarding also tests and Hive, we have updated Hive to the latest images. We also updated the kurtosis configs on the interrupt channel on the pinned messages. And yeah, we tried to run execute a Hive run just before this call to kind of yeah, tell you guys the results, but unfortunately that Hive run failed. So we have to investigate why that happened and just re-trigger it. Yeah, I think that's mainly it regarding DevNet 5, and which means that yeah, we have all the client teams looking into these bugs, and yeah, they basically have to be fixed. And there's also regarding DevNet 6, so there's going to be an execution spec test release soonish, and we are basically going to rely on that release to also run Hive tests against the clients. And once we have like these DevNet 5 bugs fixed and start running these Hive tests, I think then we will be ready like to start DevNet 6.
Okay, great, thanks. Mario?
Yeah, so we have two trackers now. So the first one, I'll share it here, is the DevNet 5 1.3.0 release. This is basically compatible with 1.2. And we're just waiting on a couple of PRs to be merged before we tag the release and just make the release to the clients. This still does not contain any breaking change. So it should be compatible with the clients that are right now running on DevNet 5, sorry. And we also have another tracker here, which is just contains one more issue. And this should be the one that we see if we are going to launch a DevNet 6. So this will contain the update to 7702, and this is incompatible with the client's current DevNet 5 releases. Yeah, that's basically it. If there are any comments, please just chime in and to see if we can make any changes that are necessary, just let us know, please.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, that was gonna be my next question as well as the difference between 6 and 5 on the spec level. And yeah, there was a 7702 change. Let's see. I mean, I think that tees us up for another thing I wanted to call out, which was essentially the CL specs release coming up. It'll be, let's see, I believe beta 1. Yeah, so version 150 beta 1. The only change from 0 to 1 here on the CL side is some extra testing at the moment. So yeah, nothing substantial there. And then in terms of specs, on the EL side, there's a 7702 change. So yeah, I mean, given the turbulence in Devnet 5, and yeah, the spec change with 7702, Devnet 6 makes sense. And yeah, okay. I guess that's where we're at. Anyone? Yeah, I guess one question is like timing wise, do we want to aim for DevNet 6 like next week? Is like even early next week would be ideal. Anyone feel like that's too aggressive, or is there any sense of timing to fix DevNet 5? Mario?
Yeah, so maybe I can give an update on the timing release of Devnet 6 release. I think yes, it's doable. We just have to merge basically two PRs for Devnet 5 new release and one for the other one. So I think it's doable. We have to make the changes on yields still, but I think they are pretty manageable. Yeah. So next week sounds good on the testing side.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, like once clients have fixed the bugs that they are looking into currently on DevNet 5 and like the Hive tests are passing, we can do it.
Okay, great.
Yeah,
Any
and
client teams?
Perry's also saying in this chat that yeah, we are planning also shadow fork.
Okay, yeah, amazing. We got a thumbs up from Nethermind. Any client teams feel like, do they feel good about this? Do they feel like it's too aggressive? Point being is as soon as we knock this out, we can then think about test nets and mainnet. So we would like to ship Pectra as quickly as possible, as we all know. Tim has a question. Do we want all DevNet 5 bugs fixed, or do we want in DevNet 6 ready teams? Yeah, so this is a good question. Like, rather than blocking on every last issue with 5, we get to go ahead and pipeline 6 of it. Anyone opposed to something like this? We could basically say clients who are ready with .NET 5 now, then we can turn around and launch 6, again, pretty early next week.
I like that idea.
Yeah, same.
Okay, cool.
So I think it would be good to verify that clients fix DevNet 5 bugs, so we can use this network to test, but it shouldn't block us to start DevNet 6 with the clients that are ready. That's my opinion.
Great. Let's see, and there is, okay, so it looks like this PR is open. Is this the 7702 update? I don't know if this was an update to the update. PR 9248. I lost track of who was owning these changes. Is anyone here responsible for them? Do we have, is Ansgar on the call? You're an author here. I don't see him. Oh, here you are.
Yes, I was
Oh,
looking
wait,
for a second though. Which
yeah.
which
Oh,
EP
well,
is
you
that?
got it. This is to 7702. So there was a kind of last minute update over the last week or two. And yeah, in any case, like Lance here, he says I'll merge it. So
Yeah,
we'll
it makes
be
sense. I think Matt has had the closest kind of focus on the AP.
okay. Thanks. So great, we can do that, and yeah, that should have all the specs settled, and then we'll get the testing release together, and we'll pipeline Devnet 6, get it out the door as soon as we can. Very good. Anything else on Pectra? We could go ahead and talk about potential testnet or mainnet fork timings. I don't know if that's going to be a bit of a distraction for us today. Do we want to wait until Devnet 6 is out and looks stable before talking about that in earnest? Okay. I'll assume that's a yes. But in that case, then maybe since the bugs are known, right? Well, and more, I mean, more just to get, start to build a consensus around timelines. Like, ideally, we can have 6 out next week, and hopefully it looks perfect. And from there, yeah, we can at least think about moving to testnets in February. Yeah, okay, I'm looking at the calendar. Might be a little tight, but yeah, I mean, again, ideally then we can do testnets in February and aim for a March mainnet fork. Does anyone disagree with these high-level timelines? Okay, we got a let's try. Okay, yeah. So yeah, there's generally consensus in the chat. So yeah, I think that'll generally be the plan. And then sure, as things come up, we'll have to maybe adjust here or there, but it seems achievable to me. Oh yeah, Tim has a nice comment here. So if we fork before March 13th, that would be less than 1 year since we shipped the blobs to then turn around and upgrade the blobs again, which is super cool. So yeah, it gives us some anchor in mid-March, and that'll just mean, yeah, we'll be quite busy with releases and then also the testnet forks in February. But assuming we can get 5 and 6 wrapped up in the next week, let's say, I think we'll be in a really good place for that. Yeah, okay, so Tim here has a suggestion. Say we go for like March 11th for mainnet, then that would suggest, yeah, I think, what is that, the second week of February? Either way, Feb, 12th or 19th, or then a shot a week to 19 or 26 for testnets. So February is kind of short. Those are kind of pretty much our only options. But from the chat, it sounds like people are generally okay with this.
So if we wanted to do February 12th, it means we want the client releases out, say, on February 3rd, which is less than 2 weeks from now. If we wanted to do February 19th for the first, then we want the releases out maybe for February 10th, which is 3 weeks, a bit less than 3 weeks from now. So I don't know if practically teams have a deal of is 2-ish weeks reasonable for testnet releases? Is 3 weeks more reasonable?
I feel like historically it's been more like 2. And yeah.
I meant from now, right? It's more so from now, do we think we can actually get client releases in 2 weeks?
Right. Yeah.
Or is it more 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can do 2 weeks on the Lighthouse side.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, I mean, focus on Devnet 5 bugs. We'll get 6 up next week. Then from there, assuming 6 looks great, then yeah, we can charge ahead with releases and 2 testnets in February. Everyone seems to be generally on the same page that this is not impossible, which is good to hear.
Great. So maybe in terms of next steps, I can propose some blocks async in the chat. We can agree to that on next week's call, assuming things are going well. And then if things are fine by next week's call, clients should be ready to put out a release sometime between like next Thursday and the Monday after that. And then we'd have the blog post go out, on somewhere between the 3rd and the 5th, and then first fork Hosky, and then Sepolia.
Sounds great to me. One question I'd have is if we can basically pipeline the testnet releases. Like, could we cut a release for the client each? Yeah, like, could we have one client release that has both Sepolia and Kaleshki?
Yes, sorry, yeah, that was my assumption. So on
Okay,
Feb 3, we release clients for with the fork blocks for both testnets. And then once we fork the testnet, we release clients with the fork block for mainnet.
Okay. Cool. Okay then. Anything else on Pectra? It sounds like we have a path to mainnet, which is really exciting. And otherwise, yeah, everyone's pretty heads down on getting there. Anything else we should touch on right now? Okay, cool. Then we will move on in the agenda. Next up, yeah, section around blob scaling. And yeah, I guess one question to ask is if there's been any update with the PureDOS work. There is a parallel stream with PureDOS, and I saw from the testing call the other day that people are kind of progressing, but no big update there for the moment.
I can give a quick update.
Sure.
Yes. So Paris run Devnet with Prism only during about 5 days. But Prism has a very slow memory leak, and so the Kubernetes kurtosis OOM killed the Prism supernode after 5 days. Not sure it's related to PureDOS, and we are investigating it. Since yesterday, there is Lighthouse and Prism, which are ready to interrupt. So the devs started to interrupt Lighthouse and Prism. There is some issues, and we are investigating. And other clients are still implementing the spec for the next DevNet.
Okay,
So,
cool.
Okay.
Yeah, progress is progress. I'll take it.
Cool.
Yeah, great. So yeah, I mean, hopefully once Spectra's out, this should be on top of everyone's mind, and yeah, we can really dig into PureDOS on top of the foundation from this work stream that's been happening in parallel. Thank you. Oscar?
Maybe just a quick remark on that point. Wait, wrong microphone.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so,
can hear you.
yeah, just a quick remark on that. I think right now for these devnets or the preparation for the devnets, we're still using relatively low throughput numbers just to make it easier to basically reach stability there. But just to basically the expectations are set right. Like I think at least the goal, maybe it's a bit of a stretch goal, but the stretch goal basically for PureDOS would in principle be to like roll it out at 8x the throughput of Pectra. So basically 6, 9, both values times 8, basically more or less, because that is in principle on paper kind of like the efficiency gains you should get going to sampling. Now, the expectation is that then once we kind of have mature devnets, there might be some bottlenecks that we run into that basically just like will require some work to resolve, so that maybe we then decide to not actually ship Fusaka quite at that level and we go back down a little bit. But just so the people don't expect that just the current throughput levels would be the ones that are basically the target for Fusaka, just so that kind of that expectation is set as early as possible. Yeah, just wanted to mention that.
Sorry, what numbers did you say?
Basically, 8 times the Pectra throughput. So wait, what is that? 6 times 8, so like 48, and 9 times 8, so 72. 48, 72 should be like at least the what we should aim for like mature devnets, and then we can see if we can actually stay at that level or if we have to go back down before we roll it out. But yeah, 4872 I think would be the logical on paper kind of goal to aim for here, given the efficiency gains of sampling.
Cool. More blobs is better. So yeah, that'll be really exciting to see. Okay. There's nothing else around PureDOS in particular. I do want to bring up this idea a number of people have been discussing lately on Twitter and various places. Like, yeah, essentially, how can we think about making core development faster, essentially, with lower latency to these different things? And one obvious suggestion would be to parallelize things. There's this concept that's come up of a blob parameter only fork, a BPO fork, where we would essentially make a commitment to treat the blobs kind of like very fully as a different layer of the stack. And in doing so, you could imagine that once we are convinced that some increase to the blob count, say like what Ansgar is suggesting with PureDOS and this 8x scaling, once we know that's ready to go, we basically greenlight that and have some sort of accelerated stream or lane, let's say, through ACD to make that happen. I think it's a pretty exciting idea. And yeah, I'm not sure if anyone else has seen this, but in any case, I did want to bring it up, get it on your radar. I think it's a really interesting prompt just to think about, like, yeah, we do have these very important parts of the protocol. And, sometimes we can get really in the weeds with some particular EIP discussion, which then can block other things, given, again, how important blobs are to scaling Ethereum. This seems like a natural fit to be one of these things that we kind of focus on in a special way. Terrence, you have a comment?
Yeah, so I think given the current testing is around 12 max blobs per block follow, I think 8 times. I don't want to sound like a negative Nancy, but I think it's a little hard. It could be a little harder than we think. I think it all depends on testing results. So I think the sooner we can simulate, the better. I suspect we may need something like EPBS at the end of the day to do more delayed pipelining, such that there are 12 seconds to propagate the blobs versus today it's only 1 second because of we're close to the 4 second deadline. So I think timing might be an issue there.
Right. So, I think this was Ansgar's point is the max that PureDOS would give us would be sort of this 8x scaling. But then, obviously, if we're on testnets / devnets and we see that there are issues like this, we would scale it back down. Yeah, Francesco had a question here. Is that because of local block building, or yeah, was there something in particular where you started to see these tight timings?
I mean, it's just today, timing game is inevitable, right? Builders, there are even relayers, they delay until 3 seconds to do anything because they get more time for the get header, right? So because of that, you either see timing gain, or if there's a huge MEV opportunity, then builders are just willing to censor blobs. They just choose not to include blob, and that's not ideal either. So yeah, so you have this inherent contradicting force at play.
Right. Yeah. So pipelining is good. If we, definitely if we find that we need it, that's a tool in our toolbox to also consider as we think about these changes. And maybe circling back to this VPO idea, that would be an obvious sort of caveat if, we need the vision with this VPO fork is that, almost like the Ice Age, but for the blob count, you could imagine we have almost semi-regular forks where you're bumping up the blob counts to numbers that we have, done the analysis and research to understand is safe. If we need, say, some massive consensus change, like moving from PureDOS to, some other DS construction, then yeah, it's not as simple as just dialing up a number. And that's a bit more complicated. So, and to your point, this is something that we could see where it's yeah, if we do run into some timings, either due to timing games or just client software today, then we might need more invasive changes to get to a safe spot. Kev has a question. This would be in the worst case where timing games are being done and the proposer falls back. Right. Well, I mean, so Terrence's point is that even with remote building or like using the meta pipeline, like builders still play timing games, but they basically just, they do it at the expense of blobs. So, blobs are relatively big. They also don't block propagation. So what you can do instead of, like if you want to like get that extra edge by like delaying a bit, you would just have fewer blobs, and then you can still land on chain in time. But then there's less blob throughput. Like Client has a comment here. The fact that we need to do analysis to verify a particular blob parameter increase is safe means it's nothing like a difficulty bomb. And I mean, maybe that wasn't a helpful analogy, but ultimately the idea is to make a commitment as ACD to like focus on this and have it be like a primary thing that we think about. One point here to recognize is that a number of different layer twos have reached out, and I think they're very interested in helping us with any analysis we need to do. So very much they want more blobs. We want more blobs. We can work together to get more blobs. So I'm pretty optimistic that this is definitely at least an avenue worth exploring. Oscar?
Yeah, I just wanted to say on this kind of general topic, like I do think ultimately blob throughput is mostly like a supply side thing, not a demand side thing. So basically, yes, we should of course, in terms of setting priorities, always have an eye on like how many blobs would there be demand for. And I think right now the answer is as many as we can give. So basically, like definitely it should be a priority for us. But ultimately, at the end of the day, kind of there are always the technical constraints of like within whatever thing we think is the acceptable maximum load on any given node, how many blobs of throughput can we have? And then the only times that ever changes is usually whenever we actually change the protocol in one way or another. Or I mentioned chat, like for example, if say we roll out a sharded mempool design or something, sometimes those could be out of protocol changes, but still, usually only when there's actual like an actual change in how much we can sustainably basically support. So I don't really see the case of like basically we can't just be like, oh, okay, now there's more demand, so like tomorrow we are increasing by 20% because presumably, hopefully, nodes already run at the maximum that they can support at any given technology stage.
Right. Yeah, but I don't think we always know that, right? So like you could imagine that we do, I think historically the ACD posture has been quite conservative. We could say, hey, let's start with 3.6. And, did anything actually change with respect to get to 6.9? Well, what changed is just our confidence in seeing this on mainnet, understanding that, it actually works and that there's headroom to do this. So I think that's where this sort of idea is coming from, is like, yes, we would have these like technical changes that would unlock sort of new regimes of like possible numbers, but you could still then imagine almost like a linear or like a scaling on some curve to unlock more blobs. And in a world where that's the case, then something like a BPO fork or like sequence of forks, I think starts to make a lot of sense. There was another idea floating around that Tim shared here. Another version would be to move blob target control under the validator's domain. So the idea here would be treating it like the gas limit, whereas today, if we want to pump the gas to say 36 million, that's up for validators to signal. And then as they go to build blocks, the gas limit can raise or lower over time. There has been this idea to do this with the blobs as well. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on this. Would we want to basically take the blob limit, these blob parameters out of the protocol and put them into stakers' hands? Ben?
I think it's an interesting idea and it would be good. However, it's a hard one because the gas limit's easy to vote on because it's so fine-grained. Whereas the blob limit, since it's hard, low value integer numbers, I don't know how that would work unless, people voted fractions like they do with the gas, and only when it passed or dropped below, you took the You can have
Yeah.
5 blobs when it's
Yeah, something like that.
touch and touch.
So
Yeah.
you can set the blob, let me get the name right here, but the target blob gas per block. And this would mean it's not necessarily like a full integer, but I don't know. So a researcher told me you could target a non-integer value in the client, but then I don't know if this is only true at a spec level, but then, the clients make all these assumptions or roundings internally that it would break. But there could be a way that, like, yeah, we have a bit more of like a gradual, like some gradual threshold, a bit like the gas limit, and then when we go over that threshold, then we raise by 1 or lower by 1.
Right. That was what Ben was suggesting just now. But I mean, at the end of the day, like the blobs are, they're discrete. They are relatively big. So like it would be like, say, adding another 128 kilobytes for every increment, right? It's not something where you can like just very gradually do this. And then if you think about it, it's like, okay, as like a home staker, like, yeah, am I supposed to be like, oh yeah, I feel like I have more bandwidth, let me just bump this up.
I mean, it would have
It's an
to be
interesting idea.
it would have to be post PeerDAS where there's a lot more flexibility in the capacity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so some interest, but a lot of open questions, it sounds like, around having validators control the blob limit. Cool. I did drop a link to more information if anyone's curious. Where did it go? So there's an ETH Magicians post here. Proto has a nice post here, I think explaining more of the idea. Let's see, I think I saw Proto on the call. I don't know if you want to say anything else, but if not, yeah, I think to continue the conversation, go to ETH Magicians. And yeah, definitely an interesting idea.
Yes, feedback welcome on ETH Magicians. We're here to support the safe increase of blobs.
Sweet, thank you. And yeah, I mean, just from scanning the chat, it looks like there's more interest than I would have thought for having this be a validator controlled parameter. So I would say that's another avenue to explore. Cool. Okay. If there's nothing else on the blobs for now, there was a comment here. Tim wanted to make a suggestion around, again, improving ACD process, and in particular, a bit of a retrospective on Petra. Tim, I don't know if you'd want to give any context. Otherwise, I can say a few words.
Sure. So, as some of you may have noticed, people have opinions about awkward devs. And I think Petra has been kind of a wild fork in terms of coordination and planning, and also a lot has changed over the past couple of years. So we've had a few of these awkward devs, like retrospectives in person at different points. But I think before we kind of jump into plan Fusaka, it might be worth having like longer conversation around how do we want to approach the process? Are there things we want to do differently? I think we've done a couple tweaks in the past year, which hopefully will be good. But yeah, I wanted to open the floor of like, one, are people generally interested in this? And then two, how do people feel we should like gather input or feedback? My sense is if we just like dedicate all core devs to this without any prior context, it'll be kind of a mess. So I was thinking either we do some sort of like breakout room tracks, or we have an ETH Magicians thread where people can chime in, and then I can try to summarize that before a call. Oh yeah, curious how people feel. And then maybe the other dimension as well is like to what extent we want this to be, client teams feedback versus like the community's feedback, and how we should potentially separate those two things. yeah, so I guess it's kind of like a meta conversation about how we improve the process. And then if we do want to move forward from this, based on the feedback today, I can make like a more concrete proposal of how we do this as we wrap up Pectra.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think, like you said, and we all very much feel, Pectra is quite of a wild hard fork relative to the others. So taking a moment to reflect and just generally check in with like ACD as a body and as a process sounds super valuable. So yeah, I mean, I think what you said with like having a magician's thread, we can leave that up for like say 2 weeks or something, and then find an ACD to kind of discuss feedback and have a conversation there.
I think this is Justin from Basic here. I think wild probably means different things to different people. So I'd love for whatever conversation we have to, call it some of the explicit things and cite examples of, hey, this was tough or stressful or whatever the impression is.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one thing that could be quite helpful for client teams is if every client team could like think through this internally and then share some sort of summary, kind of like we did for the hard fork inclusion proposal. So like understanding like, this is what the Besu team thought and this is what like Nethermind thought. And if people want to share their personal opinions in addition to that, I think that's fine as well. But like, being able to like average out or get like the rough mapping of all the client teams would be good. And then and then my sense is I would also open this for the community and we can figure out based on how much input, like what do we want to do on a call, but it would be good to get like external observers and users' perspectives into this as well.
Yeah, what's your sense having like, should we just have one massive like awkward dev or sorry, ETH magicians thread? Or maybe like one that's like more community focused, one, I think at times we've talked about having sort of like gated participation, not really
I
to
think
lock
we
people out,
can.
but just to keep the conversation manageable.
I think I can handle one single thread.
Okay.
There's now an AI summarizer as well on ETH Magician. So if it gets too
Oh,
wild,
wow. Okay.
we can rely on LLMs.
Okay.
And then I'll try,
Okay.
so I'll open a thread and then I'll try to like pin the client team's perspectives, and then if there's any particularly good comments or write-ups, to try and keep it a bit cleaned up. And based on how Pectra like shipping goes, we can find the right call where like we're kind of waiting around for it to activate on mainnet or something to have a deeper discussion.
Yeah, sounds great. Cool. Okay. That was it on the agenda. Anything else anyone would like to discuss today? Okay. Sounds like that's a no. And I assume that's because everyone is super focused on the devnets and getting Pectra to mainnet. So yeah, a bit of retro would be nice. It has, yeah, it's been been quite a fork, and we are almost at the finish line. So yeah, again, awesome to see everyone's work to get to this point. And yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and call it for today. The next thing I suppose will be the testing call Monday. We can check in with progress on the devnets over the weekend. Okay, yeah, that's it. Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.